Hi and welcome. My name's Rob Scott from CX Today, bringing you the latest news and conversation from the customer experience technology marketplace. So today I'll be speaking to the CEO of Unifor, Umesh Sachdev, about how they're helping to reinvent the call center. Welcome, Umesh.
Rob, thank you for having me on your podcast, and it's going to be a pleasure. I'm looking forward to having a lot of fun on this conversation and having some back and forth and learning from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome and thanks for joining me. Interesting conversation lined up today. But before we get going, how about we do a quick intro? Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and Unifor, please?
Absolutely. Well, let's start with me, Rob. I'm a computer science engineer by education. I've been a serial entrepreneur. I've done 2 startups, both in the AI deep tech space. Unifor, the company I founded in 2008, is an AI and automation company focused on automating the entire front office of an enterprise, which includes customer service, sales, and marketing. In this phase of our life, we are hyper focused on the CX industry, on the customer service industry. And the reason is what you and I have come to know, that CX is the only way for enterprises to differentiate themselves in the era that we live in. In a commoditized like world where you can't differentiate cars enough from each other, shoes enough from each other, it's the differentiation of customer experience. And so Unifor is passionate about helping our customers around the world using AI and automation to provide just a spectacular customer experience to people around the world.
Great. Thanks for that intro. So, to kickstart today's conversation, just wanted to kind of talk about maybe, the recent challenges. The pandemic obviously has, created an enormous amount of traffic and almost, lots of fluctuation for the contact center and BPOs out there. What's things look like from your perspective?
Rob, you hit the nail. The last 6 months have been extremely unusual for the world at large, but also the industry that you and I are so familiar with, which is the CX industry. Going into the pandemic, call centers around the world received 100 billion calls every month. And some reports suggested, I remember at the peak of the pandemic, that number had shot up by 2.7 times.
Wow.
And that's pretty natural, right? As consumers, as you and I were asked to shelter in place in our cities and counties, etc., we couldn't go to bank branches, we couldn't go to shops, shopping malls, etc. And our go-to interface to the enterprises that we interact with were either digital or the contact center. So the role of contact center first has become extremely prominent during the pandemic. The second, what that does is creates enormous new challenges that the industry wasn't ready to work on. You, Rob, came on the Unifor podcast and spoke about the topic of future of work. In the contact center industry, the future of work became the present. And so when many industry leaders thought by 2025 they will have 30% of their population working from home in call centers, we found that during the pandemic, close to 80% of contact center workers had to work from home. The technology wasn't ready, the connectivity wasn't ready, the infrastructure wasn't ready. And so in the early days, we found the contact center and BPOs just hustling and running fast to put those things in place, make arrangements for business continuity. As that has moved on, it has led to newer challenges which have emerged, and even solution providers like Unifor have had to rise up to the challenge and move really fast to address that. For example, information security and personnel security has become a huge issue in the work from home environment, because the work from home call center is extremely different from the physical, hygienic, controlled environment of an office call center, right? Customers' data, PII, can flashes on to a contact center agent's screen to validate the customer, last 4 digits of the social, secret code, email ID, etc. These call centers, specifically BPOs, sign extremely large liabilities with their customers in case of data breaches. And so I have noticed that what's become a big top of mind issue for CEOs, and many of them who we work with in the last few months, is that the security issue has come to the fore, in terms of how do we make sure in the work from home environment, which seems to be the new normal even beyond the pandemic in call centers, to make sure we put the right technology, the right tools, to give confidence to both enterprises and consumers at large that their data is secure. The contact center workers who are working from home still have a rigorous way of being validated and authenticated at various points of time, etc. So security challenge, and then the core challenge that faced the industry going into the pandemic and which got amplified was that of one of coexistence. And it was to do with the business model of the industry. The industry came about in a fashion where the economic model was more about cost per minute or cost per seat. And so if you do the infrastructure all in onshore, as we know it, in countries like the US, Europe, Japan, then your cost per minute and cost per seat is higher. And if you're able to take some of that operation offshore, then your cost per minute or cost per seat is lower. And that blended economic average was what made this industry work. However, in the world that we live in, with the maturing of AI, the maturing of speech recognition, natural language processing, and RPA, which has become a big wave and a revelation almost in the last few years, the coming together of these trends is putting pressure on the industry to innovate one more time and relook at their business model. There is an increasing moment to move from per minute or per seat billing to a fixed price managed billing, where these BPOs and contact centers are expected to take a dollar target and say, we'll manage the operations within this target. And the only way they can do that is they now look at a healthy mix of human capacity augmented by AI and automation technology working in tandem. It is not a zero-sum game. It is not one versus the other. But the new world will require AI and automation to work simultaneously with the human capital in the contact centers in order to manage profitability in a fixed price managed service type model. And so let me summarize. The issues that the pandemic gave the industry initially were logistical in nature. How do we move 80% of call center workers to home? Once that was settled, the focus has shifted to how do we make sure it's a secure environment even while working from home, and how do we just accelerate digitization and automation projects within the call center so that the business model of the industry is still vibrant and relevant for the future.
That's really interesting. So, in terms of addressing these challenges, how are Unifor helping to solve some of these problems? Because security, automation, are huge topics, aren't they? And they're huge subjects. But if you could give us some examples how you're helping, it'd be really useful. Thank you.
Absolutely, Rob. I'd like to pick two different examples from our product innovation playbook that we've used in the last 6 months to address some of these issues that we've heard from our customers. The security issue was one that we knew of, but we didn't know how big it would become during the pandemic. And so we've gone back to our drawing board, our R&D house, and said, with the technology that Unifor has developed, can we put out something that addresses this challenge? So we've taken a combination of voice authentication technology, which is voice biometrics, in conjunction with RPA to address the security challenge. So let me explain. First, we've now come across with a technology tool that we're launching later this year. Before the end of the calendar year, we will be announcing that product. In that, it is a passive way of constant authentication of the call center agent. We've always thought of authentication being a tool for the customer, but it's also important in the work from home environment to know that the person I'm speaking with is actually the authorized employee of the bank, of the telecom service provider, And if the authorized employee hasn't taken a break and got their neighbor to attend a couple of these calls on their behalf. And so, in a passive way, using voice authentication at regular intervals, we are now using our product and combining it with AI and intelligence, able to create a security score confirming the identity of the call center agent. With that step out of the way, then we focus on making sure that when a caller calls in, typical process involves that the call center agent, before they give out your own information or do the transaction that you ask them, they authenticate who you are. And they do it by challenging you with personal information related questions. Last four digits of your social. Can you confirm your email ID? Can you confirm your date of birth? And the risk is, when you are confirming these information, they are on the screen, on the desktop that the agent is using. The big security risk, and it's majority of the call center agents are extremely sincere and conscious. But the big risk is that there might be a small minority percentage of actors who might have somebody standing behind them and taking a picture of the screen when PII information flashes on, and you have access to the entire information about the customer, which is undesirable. And so, again, an extension to our security product, which we call Trusted Environment, is that this step where the agent has to validate your information to know who you are before we move forward in the call is done in a way where RPA and AI is the one that checks the customer's information. The information is sent as a text link to the customer when they're calling. The customer can confirm that, yes, this is about me. And all the agent gets to see is a green checkbox that the customer's validated, you're clear to move forward. And so if you see, what happened was we took the step of confirming the information to the customer's mobile device and used AI and RP on the back to match it with what's existing in the CRM. And once it's matched, the agent gets a green checkbox to say customer validated. And so at no point does the information come on the agent desktop during the conversation. So using Trusted ID, which is authentication of the agent in a passive way without any new hardware or technology on the agent's home, and then Trusted Environment, which is taking the step away from the agent of confirming consumer information. We are approaching this problem in a very innovative and unique way. So that's
Really interesting. Let me ask you a question then. So, is that a challenge for the organization, the contact center organization, right now in terms of authenticating the agent? Is that becoming more of an issue in the marketplace?
That's a very interesting question, Rob. What we find is, just like any new phenomenon which emerges, some people who have been affected by some amount of fraud or identification issues are very conscious and are rushing forward with the solution. Whereas there is a large section of the contact center industry which thinks they don't have this problem. And the only way to find out, like we've done in the past in any other scenario, is for us to now come out and offer a quick dipping your feet type of an approach in saying, let's do an audit. So Unifor has an asset in the interaction analytics world. We have a product called Amina, which does speech analytics. And so what we are able to do is go to these enterprises and say, in combination with speech analytics and our security product, let's do a dipstick type of an audit of your last 3 months. So let's get your last 3 months of calls in our speech analytics system, and we'll run the security tool on top of it. And we'll tell you how many times did you not have a real agent. And that's the only way for the enterprise or us to know, is the problem big or small for them. And so we are seeing that certainly in the case of BPO, the risk is huge, whether or not the problem is big or small. Even if it's a 2% issue, because of the liabilities that call centers owe the regulators, etc., even the 2% is a massive issue, right? And for the other enterprises who probably haven't yet seen this issue or don't think it's large enough, we are offering them a way to get ahead of the curve and not wait for the problem to occur.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, trust is such a big thing in customer experience, isn't it? And if you've got that trust, customer experience, you're on a you're certainly a much higher chance of getting it right, aren't you? So, in
Yeah.
terms of the new product, this new solution, does it have a name? How are you packaging this up?
So we are calling it UTrust ID and UTrust environment. The UTrust ID product is the passive authentication of the agent, and the UTrust environment is securing the whole environment in terms of data security.
Great, and it's out late December 2020, early 2021. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great, and how can anyone interested find out more?
Well, the best way, Rob, is to reach out to Unifor, and unifor.com allows people to quickly reach out to us, and our responsive customer interaction team reaches out right back and engages with whoever is interested.
Fantastic. Umesh, it's been great talking to you today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Rob, it's a pleasure.
And that's it from us. If you've enjoyed today's session, please do give us a like or a share on social. It's always appreciated. I'm Rob Scott from CX Today. Thanks for watching.